All right, our last review video out of a seemingly endless number of review videos will be about 7.8, which is about Romanticism. Now, if I were to guess, I would think that this is probably not going to be a topic that is going to appear on the modified AP Euro test this year, but it never hurts to go over things, and I can always use these videos in the future. So let's run through it real quick. We're going to look at 19th century culture and arts here, as it says, and our main focus is going to be on Romanticism, but we will also talk about Realism and the arrival of new art like Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and Cubism. All right, so the big focus they want you to have here is explain the changes in continuity in European artistic expression from 1815 to 1914. And much like it was with science, we're going to see pretty profound changes in this particular feature of European culture. All right, so the first thing they want you to talk about is Romanticism. Romanticism broke with neoclassical forms of artistic representation and with rationalism, placing more emphasis on intuition and emotion. That's the big cultural shift that we see during this time, moving away from rationality to irrationality or imagination or things like that. And so over here on the left, they list various romantic artists. We have Goya, Frederick, Turner, Constable, Delacroix. Let's take a look at them real quick and see famous works of art for them. Okay, so this first one should be familiar to anybody that has ever been in PB5. This is the 3rd of May. One way that Romanticism portrayed art was in the promotion of national histories, the support of revolutions in favor of a nationalist attitude or identity. And so Francisco de Goya's The 3rd of May of 1814 is a good example of this, promoting the feeling and emotion of this moment, promoting the national history, the Spanish resistance against the Napoleonic invasion during the Peninsular Wars. Echoing this theme, here is a work of art that commemorates the rise of Louis Philippe, the July Revolution of 1830. This is Liberty Leading the People by Eugene Delacroix. And so again, it is promoting a nationalist revolution, the emotion of revolution against the established order, the promotion of French nationalism as an identifying and unifying sort of feature. And so Romanticism can focus on these sorts of things, but that's not the only thing that Romanticism dealt with. Here we have a really bucolic scene that we see happening. This is by John Constable, who is an English artist. This is known as the Hay Wain. And so we see this bucolic rural setting. Romanticism often glorified the past. It glorified rural and agricultural pursuits. And it was oftentimes a reaction against the changing urban industrial nature features of 19th century European life. J.M.W. Turner, I know we looked at this in class. This is looking at rain, steam, speed. This is a rural agricultural setting, but here we have a train, a locomotive, going through the countryside, right? This is a nod to the changing ways of life and the way that industrial society is rapidly transforming European society. Then we also have David Frederick Casper. So one way Romanticism operates is that it glorifies rural, agricultural sorts of ways of life. It also presents nature in a new way. The rational view of nature was that it could be perfected and that it was orderly. Romantic artists are often going to portray nature like Casper does, with more of a respect for nature and its power, being in awe of nature, the power of nature, right? And we're going to see this really well in this next one when we look at the Raft of the Medusa. These people set adrift on a lifeboat at sea at the mercy of the pounding sea. Man is not in control of nature. Nature is in control of man. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay, yes, there we go. All right, so we're going to see romantic art. It's going to move away from neoclassical ideas about sacrifice for the public good, and it's going to glorify more individual achievement. It's also going to stray away from rationality, and it's going to focus more on emotion and feeling and intuition. We also see this in music as well. There is going to be romantic artists who are composers like Beethoven, Chopin, Wagner. Wagner is the only one we talked about. If you remember, he was in a primary source packet I gave you. He was very much in favor of nationalism, and as a result of that, he was quite anti-Semitic. And he would talk about how Jews had no place in German society because they weren't German, and that they were like, spoiling the blood or whatever. My guess is there's not going to be much about music on the test. I make that bet every year. I've never been wrong. I'm 99.9% sure it will not be on a 5-question modified DBQ. Key thing here is that romantic art shows a movement away from rationality and focusing on emotion, nature, individuality, intuition, supernatural features, national histories, those sorts of things. We are also going to see this in writing. Writers like what's his first name? Victor Hugo is going to produce Les Miserables, which is a celebration of an uprising that takes place in France in 1832 during the reign of Louis Philippe. We are going to see this with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right? She tries to create something through science like the perfect human. Instead, Frankenstein's monster runs amok and goes crazy. Byron writes lots of poems glorifying nature and stuff like that. He also lives like a wild man as well. All right, then as the Industrial Revolution becomes more and more a feature of European societies, as life becomes more urban, as it becomes more influenced by industrialization, we are going to see art reflect that. The realist artists like Honoré Daumier are going to be like the muckrakers in America. They are going to paint everyday scenes, and they're not going to sugarcoat it for anyone. They're going to portray the societal ills that exist. This here is Third Class Carriage, which shows the difficulty and harsh conditions that the urban poor, that the industrial workers are subjected to in this new industrial economy. They're not mentioned in the course description, but we talked about how writers, novelists are going to critique bourgeois society. They're going to call out features of like loveless marriages or alienation within industrial society, but they're not going to propose any sort of solution to these problems. They're just going to be basically like, here's what life is like, and I don't know, you figure it out. But that's not in the course description, but it is something that we talked about. And then we are going to see a third movement in art, and that is going to be the arrival of the Impressionists. And I put Monet down here because Monet shows up in the course description. If we go back and look now, modern art, including Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and Cubism, moved beyond the representational to the subjective, abstract, and expressive, and often provoked audiences that believe that art should reflect shared and idealized values, including beauty and patriotism. So here are some people that we could choose for Impressionism. I chose Monet, but he's so prolific and has so many works that there's really not one that I could choose to look at. The key idea here is that the Impressionists are not going to draw or paint things as they actually appear. They're trying to catch a moment in time, and so the paintings often look unfinished. They're going to break rules about balance and proportion. They are going to paint everyday scenes. It will only change from there. We'll have Post-Impressionism. Here is an example of that. Let me see if I can successfully do this. So right here is an example of, it's like a facsimile of Starry Night. This was actually painted by ya boy at one of those Pinot Palais type places, but this is a Van Gogh work that they had us do. It's quite beautiful, probably better than the original, and certainly better than this rendition, which was done by the Misses. Let's see if I can figure this out. Not nearly as good. Anywho, Post-Impressionism is going to continue this, and it's going to often incite great reaction and anger to what is produced, which is funny because today people think of Impressionism and Monet as beautiful, as calming, as awesome, but they were quite punk rock, and they were going against conventional wisdom of what art was and what it should be, and it's going to provoke a very harsh reaction to it. Last but not least, and then we'll call it quits for today, we're going to have experimentations even with color that we see, like when Matisse is going to portray dancing, right? And this is completely going against European trends in art. It is primitive. It is not showing things in great detail like Renaissance artists had since the Renaissance. It's going to experiment with the use of color, only using red, blue, and green, which I think are primary colors. I don't know. You guys know more about art than I do, but that sort of experimentation going on in art is going to provoke quite the backlash. All right, and so I think that is all we have. Let me know which Van Gogh replica you thought was better, 1 or 2. Remember, 1's by your boy. It should get your vote. I'll see you guys Zoom on Friday, the 1st of May, International Workers' Day as well. I'm going to try and take a picture of this weird collage that is on this after-school place by my house, which is supposed to be like an after-school boys club type thing. But it looks like a communist mural. It's very weird. I'll have to show you guys it. But anyway, that's a little, in the education business, that's what we call a hook, trying to get you hooked on the lesson. I hope you enjoyed these review videos. Good luck on the test, and I'll talk to you.